Do you feel lost in the scriptures? Start here. Question of the day. What do you think is the difference between self-awareness and being too self-critical? Tell me in the comments below. We're going to come back to that. But first, let's dive into what is happening in Come Follow Me this week with some terrible art. After finishing his words to Jacob, Lehi spoke to his youngest son, Joseph, and explained that he was named after their ancestor Joseph, who was taken captive into Egypt. He said that Joseph had seen a vision of the future that showed one of his descendants, Joseph Smith, would be part of the restoration of the gospel. Lehi explained how Joseph Smith would help bring forth an important book, the Book of Mormon, which together with the Bible would bring people to Christ. Lehi blessed Laman and Lemuel's children that if they fell away from the covenant path, the cursing for that would be laid at their parents' feet because it would be due to a lack of proper teaching on their part. After these blessings, Lehi later died and was buried, and shortly after, Laman and Lemuel were angry at Nephi for preaching to them. As Nephi wrote about the joy he found in the scriptures and the things of the Lord, he mourned his sins, but also recognized how blessed he had been. The Lord had given Nephi the ability to make his enemies physically quake in his presence. He'd seen visions, angels had visited him, and he'd been carried to high mountains to converse with the Lord. Nephi shared his overwhelming frustration with his weaknesses and his desire not to give in to them anymore. Nephi continued to pray for peace with his brothers. However, Laman and Lemuel plotted to kill Nephi so that they could be the rulers of the family. The Lord warned Nephi to leave, so Nephi took his family, along with Zoram, Sam, Jacob, Joseph, his sisters, and anyone else who would accompany him, along with provisions, the brass plates, Laban's sword, and the Liahona, and traveled for many days before settling in a land they called Nephi. They worked hard and began to build a settlement. Their people were known as Nephites, and those who followed Laman were known as Lamanites. The Lamanites were cursed and became idle and started wars with the Nephites. And that's what's happening in Come Follow Me this week. Let's get into the investigate section where we are going to be talking about this whole idea of self-awareness today. We are going to be in 2 Nephi chapter 4, and we are reading what is sometimes called Nephi's Psalm. I remember the first time I read 2 Nephi 4 read properly, it was by my roommate in college. And she was a former theater type of person, just really passionate about certain things. And when she read Nephi's Psalm, she read it with feeling. And I wish I could do that for you, but I'm not a theater person, so that's awkward. Okay, we are going to be in 2 Nephi 4, verses 17 through 24, if you want to mark these as Nephi's Psalm here. So I'll read it with some feeling. I just can't do it like her. I'll read it with some feeling, okay? You forced me. This is Nephi, and he starts out by saying like, oh, I delight in the scriptures and things are awesome. And then it's like he comes crashing down to reality. He says, nevertheless, notwithstanding the great goodness of the Lord and showing me his great and marvelous works, my heart exclaimeth, O wretched man that I am. Yea, my heart sorroweth because of my flesh. My soul grieveth because of mine iniquities. I am encompassed about because of the temptations and the sins which do so easily beset me. And when I desire to rejoice, my heart groaneth because of my sins. Nevertheless, I know in whom I have trusted. Okay, can we just... We have to pause there because I love this. Raise your hand if you can relate to Nephi. Do you feel like you are not the person you wish you could be? Do you feel like you give into temptation too much? Hello, Nephi. We all see you right now.
Finally, someone understands me.
But then I love what he says in verse 19. Nevertheless, I know in whom I have trusted. And guess who it's not? He hasn't trusted in Nephi. He hasn't trusted in Lehi. He has trusted in the Lord. And that's what makes a difference, right? Now let's read what God has done for him. And we're actually going to let's make a list. So we're going to make a list of all the things that Jesus has done for him. He says, my God hath been my support. He hath led me through mine afflictions in the wilderness, and he hath preserved me upon the waters of the great deep. No, he has preserved me upon the waters of the great deep, with a P. He hath filled me with his love, even unto the consuming of my flesh. He hath confounded mine enemies unto the causing of them to quake before me. Behold, he hath heard my cry by night, by day. I assumed. Terrible. He hath heard my cry by day, and he hath given me knowledge by visions in the nighttime. Okay, we're actually going to stop at verse 23 here, but I love this list. I've actually got it written over here. So what he says is God has supported him. He has led him. He has preserved him. He's filled him with love. God has heard him and he has given him knowledge. I love this list of gifts. Now, here's the really cool thing about Nephi. I actually had someone comment on one of my Instagram posts and say, man, Nephi must have been so annoying to have for a brother. And I'm like, I mean, okay. But they were just saying, maybe he was super self-righteous and that's why Laman and Lemuel had such a hard time. I don't know. Looking at this list, I don't see a self-righteous guy. I mean, obviously he's writing from the vantage point of like 30 years, 40 years, 30. I don't know the years. I'll put it right here. This number of years later. But looking at this, he seems very self-aware, very aware of what he does not get right, but also very aware of what Jesus gets right and how it makes a difference. I think that what Nephi is saying is, man, I am blessed, but I am also broken in so many ways. And don't we all need that? Do you know anyone who is not self-aware, who thinks, I've got it all together. My life is perfect. I'm amazing. People who lack self-awareness are usually like the least favorite person in books. Like if you think about it, Dolores Umbridge. If you have not read Harry Potter or watched it, move on. Go to this point. I'll give you a time here. Fast forward because I'm going to give things away. Dolores Umbridge, the worst, I think maybe even worse than Voldemort character in Harry Potter, who pretends to be sweet and wonderful but is actually terrible, sees absolutely no problem with what she's doing. She sees no problems. She thinks she's perfect. She lacks self-awareness, the awareness that what she is doing is wrong, that she's actually a terrible person, and that she should stop wearing pink because she looks ridiculous. It seems like it would be somewhat humiliating, right? Oh, I have to admit that I have weaknesses, but wholly empowering. How much more do you admire Nephi than maybe Laman and Lemuel, who think Nephi's the problem and don't see the problems in themselves, right? Self-awareness is key. All right, let's move on to verify. So in this section, we are going to verify a truth or a falsehood about a rumor that is spreading like wildfire. Maybe not like wildfire, but has spread, and find out what's actually correct. So 2 Nephi chapter 4, verse 5 kind of gives rise to a rumor that I have heard within the church many times. So let's read this verse and then talk about the rumor. This is Lehi speaking to his sons, and he says, "But behold, my sons and my daughters, I cannot go down to my grave, save I should leave a blessing upon you. For behold, I know that if ye are brought up in the way ye should go, ye will not depart from it." This kind of feels weird because Lehi is literally talking to his sons who have already departed from the covenant path. And yet he's saying, he's like, if you're brought up in the right way, you won't depart from the path. And so there is this rumor that if parents in the gospel are faithful, their kids one day are guaranteed to return. So let's figure out, is that rumor true or is it false? So one of the supporting sources for this rumor comes from Orson F. Whitney, who was quoting Joseph Smith. So here's what he said. He said, "The prophet Joseph Smith declared, and he never taught a more comforting doctrine, that the eternal sealings of faithful parents would save not only themselves, but likewise their posterity." So it sounds like, yes, they will return. Okay, let's get a more, my gosh, English is hard. Let's get a more modern day. Let's get a more modern day quote here that talks about this. So President Boyd K. Packer, in this quote, what I'm getting from him, he seems to infer that a lot of children stray because of the influences of the world at this time, but that those influences won't always be there. And so that's why those children will return. So he said, "It is not uncommon for responsible parents to lose one of their children for a time to influences over which they have no control." So this is talking about the moral pollution, right, of the world. He says, "It is my conviction that those wicked influences one day will be overruled." So the wickedness that's happening in the world right now, the stuff that is making those children stray, will be overruled. And then he says, "When parents keep the covenants they have made at the altar of the temple, their children will be forever bound to them." I'm not sure how to interpret that. Does that just mean like they're bound to them in that they get to visit them if their child ends up in a different kingdom? I don't know. But here's what Robert L. Millett, by the way, Robert L. Millett is a genius. He was the Dean of Religious Education at BYU, just the smartest guy. And he commented on this quote and he said, as President Packer suggested, it may be that the oppressive power of evil in these last days is such that it chokes or restrains the proper exercise of agency. One day that will change. So the viewpoint then, they're basically taking what I never call him president, the prophet Joseph Smith said about, okay, if you are faithful, your children will return. And what they seem to be saying is that it will be because of the oppressive power of evil being overcome, that one day that's going to change and your children will be able to use their agency more properly. Now, President Joseph Fielding Smith taught this. There are so many quotes, you guys, but this matters. Those born under the covenant throughout all eternity are the children of their parents. Nothing except the unpardonable sin or sin unto death can break this tie. If children do not sin, as John says, unto death, the parents may still feel after them and eventually bring them back to them again. So it seems like, and I'm curious what you guys think, it seems like a parent's righteous influence, which is felt now, but it will be felt more in the spirit world. And that as long as our kids don't commit the unpardonable sin, it's the sin against the Holy Ghost, then that oppressive power of evil that we're feeling in the last days, it's going to be diminished so that our children will then return because they feel the draw of those ties we have to them. I don't know if I proved or disproved this rumor. It seems hopeful that children will return, but not because they're forced by parents, but because through their own agency, feeling the loving pull of their parents, and through the decrease of those oppressive forces of evil, they will choose to return. Maybe. I don't know. Tell me what you think in the comments below. Okay, we have some awesome evidence, and this I have to give credit here. So evidencecentral.org. You might know Scripture Central, Book of Mormon Central. These are just amazing, genius people, and they have assembled an entire website where it shares evidence that the Book of Mormon is true. And so a lot of the evidence I'll be sharing with you guys this year is from evidencecentral.org. So we get to see Lehi blessing his children, right? He gives this final great blessing to all of his children before he dies. And in Jewish literature from, 200 BC to AD 500, the literature was pretty filled with what was called testamentary literature. By the way, to clarify, why is it called testamentary? The word testament, I looked it up. It's a valedictory address of an authoritative or respected figure delivered in anticipation of imminent death. So it's the deathbed message of a really important person. And so this testamentary literature was pretty prolific during this time period around which Nephi was writing. And it was based on Jacob's blessings to his sons. And so the basic format of this testamentary literature. So let's imagine important person facing death, right? That's the first part. An important person is facing death. Second, this person then calls the family to be around his bed. Third, the person warns the family to avoid specific temptations. Fourth, the person then offers instructions on being righteous. Fifth, the person gives blessings and curses. And then sixth, the person will often illustrate the blessings and curses using imagery from a dream or a vision that they had had. And will you check this out? Lehi's final blessing to his children, what does it look like? Okay, can I just ask you, were you aware of testamentary literature before we talked about it today? And even if you were aware of it, could you have produced it? No, okay? We don't know how to produce testamentary literature. Joseph Smith certainly would have not. He didn't have access to the internet. He didn't have access to this type of information. So the fact that Lehi, his very last blessing to his family, exactly correlates with this testamentary literature that was so popular at the time that Nephi was writing, not a surprise because the Book of Mormon is true. It's true. It's true. It's true. I can't even. It's amazing. The gospel is true. The Book of Mormon is true. And remember, the scriptures are awesome and so are you. So go dive into them. And wait, if you're still here, I'm so thankful. Make sure that you subscribe because when you subscribe, you do not miss a single video, but you also help me to get these videos out to basically everyone on YouTube. My goal, I'm scared to tell you this, is to get up to 100,000 subscribers this year. Would you help me do that? Maybe I'll have to do a giveaway. But will you help me do that? Share this video with someone else, subscribe so that others will see it, and let's see if we can reach our 100K goal.